Take that dress off.
We're in the car, Dojin.
I said take it off.
Take it off. Do-jin's voice cuts through the leather interior of his Maybach like a blade. 3 words. No room for negotiation. Flora's breath catches. They're parked in the underground garage of his building, engines still ticking as it cools. The gala is barely 30 minutes behind them, and her heart is still racing from everything that happened inside. We're in the car, Do-jin. She tries to keep her voice steady, but her fingers are already clutching the chocolate brown silk of her dress. The dress he'd sent to her apartment that morning with a note that simply said, "Wear this, nothing else." He turns to face her fully, and God, even in the dim garage lighting, he's devastating. That's the only word for it. Sharp jawline that could cut glass, eyes so dark they're almost black, and that tattoo, that intricate dragon that coils up his right hand, serpentines around his forearm, and disappears under his shirt sleeve only to emerge again at his collar, the tail curling just below his ear. In the world they just left, men in $10,000 suits pretended not to stare at it. In his real world, that tattoo is a signature, a warning. I said, his hand reaches across the center console, fingers grazing her knee. Take it off. Flora's hand trembles as it moves to the zipper at her side. The metallic sound seems impossibly loud. She pulls it down 1 inch, 2 inches. Then, but I'm getting ahead of myself. See, to understand why Flora Kim is sitting in a car with the most dangerous man in Seoul, about to strip out of a $5,000 dress, you need to understand how we got here. And trust me, the story is so much messier than you think. Flora had always believed in fairy tales, which is ironic, considering her job was to create them for other people. "Ms. Kim, the orchids you requested are here," her assistant Mina called from the studio entrance. Flora looked up from the seating chart she'd been arranging for the H-Wang wedding. Old money marrying older money, the kind of event where one wrong fork placement could end a family alliance. Her company, Ever After Events, had built its reputation on perfection. 3 years of 18-hour days, maxed-out credit cards, and surviving on convenience store kimbap had finally paid off. Now she planned weddings for chaebols, celebrities, and politicians. She built this, all of it from nothing. Perfect. The ceremony is in 6 hours, and Mrs. H. Wang specifically wants them arranged in the traditional style, so. The door chimed again. Flora glanced up, already preparing her, "We're closed for a private event," smile. Then she forgot how to breathe. The man in her doorway wasn't just handsome. Handsome was for actors and idols. This was something else entirely. Tall, easily 6'2", with shoulders that filled out his black suit in a way that suggested the body underneath was earned, not bought. Black hair swept back from a face that belonged on a Roman coin, all sharp angles and strong lines. And that tattoo. The dragon's head started on the back of his right hand, mouth open, breathing ink-black fire up his arm. Even in her doorway, even in daylight, he looked like he'd stepped out of shadows and might dissolve back into them at any moment. "We're actually closed," Flora started. "I need a wedding planner." His voice matched everything else about him. Deep, controlled, the kind of voice that didn't ask, it stated. Flora's professional smile clicked into place. "Of course, if you'd like to schedule a consultation, we could." "Now." 1 word, flat, final. Mina had disappeared into the back room with the speed of someone who developed excellent survival instincts. Smart girl. Flora's smile tightened. "I'm afraid I have a wedding in 6 hours that requires my full attention, but if you leave your contact information." He pulled out his phone, tapped something, and Flora's phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. Rude clients got the assistant treatment, no matter how well they wore a suit. "Check it," he said. "Sir, I really don't." "Check it." Something in his tone made her pull out her phone. A bank transfer notification. She stared at the number, then counted the zeros again because surely she'd miscounted. 50 million won. Just sitting in her account, just like that. She looked up slowly. "What is this?" "A consultation fee." He stepped fully into her studio, and Flora's space suddenly felt smaller. "I'm told you're the best. I need the best." "For a wedding." Eventually, His eyes, so dark they were almost black, fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "First, I need you for something else." Flora should have said no, should have transferred the money back, should have called security. Instead, she heard herself say, "What kind of something else?" The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, something more dangerous. "My club is opening next week. I need an event that makes people forget it's attached to my name." Flora knew exactly who he was now. She'd been too flustered to place him immediately, but the club, the tattoo, the casual way he threw around 50 million won, it clicked into place like a key in a lock she hadn't known was there. Park Do-jin, owner of 7 nightclubs across Seoul, and everyone knew what quotes around nightclubs meant: underground gambling, money laundering, the kind of business where people who asked too many questions stopped asking anything at all. "I plan weddings, Mr. Park, not club openings." "You plan dreams, Miss Kim." He'd moved closer, and she could smell his cologne now, something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke. "You take what people want and make it real. That's what I need. One night where everyone forgets who I am and just sees what I want them to see." "And what's that?" "Legitimate." The word hung between them like a confession. Flora should have walked away. She had a waiting list 6 months long. She didn't need his money or his danger or the way his eyes seemed to see straight through every professional wall she'd built. But there was something else in his expression, something that looked almost like hope. "One event," she heard herself say, "and then we're done." His smile widened a fraction. "Of course." That was 6 months ago. They weren't done. Not even close. The club opening had been perfect. Flora had transformed his space into something that belonged in Monaco or Dubai, all white marble and gold accents, champagne fountains and aerial silk performers. The guest list read like a who's who of Seoul's elite, and by the end of the night, 3 major investors had approached Do-jin about business opportunities. He'd paid her triple her fee, then asked her to plan the anniversary party for his casino in Gangnam, then the grand opening of his restaurant in Itaewon. And somehow, between the events and the planning meetings and the late-night phone calls about whether gold or silver accents better conveyed trustworthy luxury, something had shifted. "You're working for him again?" Mina had asked 3 months in, her voice carefully neutral as she organized Flora's calendar. "He pays well," Flora said, not looking up from her tablet. "He's dangerous." "He's a client." "Flora." "Mina." Flora finally met her assistant's eyes. "I grew up in a basement apartment in No One. My mother cleaned offices until her hands bled. I built this company from nothing, and I'm not going to apologize for taking money from someone who actually pays his bills on time." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough of it to make Mina drop the subject. The whole truth was more complicated. The whole truth was that Do-jin looked at her like she was the only real thing in a world of illusions. The whole truth was that somewhere between the 3rd event and the 4th, they'd stopped talking about business and started talking about everything else. His childhood in Busan before his father died and left him the family business. Her dreams of opening a wedding venue of her own someday, something intimate and perfect. The books they'd both read. The music that made them feel less alone. The whole truth was that 4 months into their professional relationship, he'd kissed her in his office after an event, and she'd kissed him back, and neither of them had pretended to be surprised. "This is just physical," he'd told her afterward, his thumb tracing her collarbone. "I can't offer you more than this." "I'm not asking for more," she'd lied. Because the thing about Do-jin was that he was 2 completely different people. There was the man the world saw cold, calculating, dangerous. The one with the dragon tattoo and the reputation that made politicians sweat. And then there was the man who called her at 2 a.m. just to hear her voice, who remembered she didn't like cilantro, who'd sent her favorite books to her apartment with passages underlined and his thoughts scribbled in the margins, who touched her like she was something precious in a life where nothing else was. That man she was falling in love with. The problem was, he never appeared in public. For 6 months, Flora had been Do-jin's secret, his after-dark pleasure, the woman he met in private clubs and hotel suites, and the penthouse apartment no one else was allowed to enter. She told herself it was enough, That she understood. That a man in his position couldn't be seen with someone like her. No family connections, no pedigree, just a black woman from no one who'd made something of herself. But then Yuna appeared. Flora first saw her at the Children's Hospital charity auction, an event Do Jin's legitimate businesses sponsored every year for tax purposes and positive press. Ms. Kim, have you met Nurse Choi Yuna? Do Jin's business manager had introduced them. She coordinates all our hospital events. Yuna was normal, pretty in an understated way, with a genuine smile and scrubs peeking out from under her cardigan because she'd come straight from a shift. The kind of woman who probably went to church on Sundays and called her mother every day. Everything Flora was. It's so nice to meet you, Yuna had said warmly. Do Jin speaks so highly of your work. Do Jin. Flora had kept her expression neutral, but the familiar use of his name had landed like a slap. Oh, we've known each other since we were kids. Our fathers were, well, they worked together. And there it was, history, shared trauma, the kind of connection Flora could never compete with. She'd watched them together that night, watched how Do Jin's shoulders relaxed when Yuna approached, how he smiled, really smiled, the kind that reached his eyes when she talked about her patients, how gentle his voice became, as if Yuna might break if he spoke too harshly. He never looked at Flora like that. With her, he was intensity and passion and barely controlled possession. But with Yuna, he was soft. She's nice, Flora had said that night in his apartment, trying to keep her voice casual. She is. Do Jin had been reading contracts, not looking up. You've known her a long time. Since we were 14. She seems sweet. Finally, he'd looked at her, those dark eyes unreadable. She is sweet, Flora. She's everything good that somehow survived our world. Is there a point to this? No, Flora had swallowed the bitter taste in her mouth. No point. But there was a point. The point was that Flora was starting to understand what she actually was to Park Do-jin. She wasn't the woman he loved. She was the one he desired. And maybe in his world, that was the best she could hope for. Maybe it even had to be enough. The gala invitation arrived on a Tuesday. The Seoul Business Excellence Awards, Flora read aloud, studying the embossed card. Very fancy. I need you there, Do-jin said over the phone. Flora's heart jumped traitorously. As your planner, do you need me to coordinate? As my date. The world tilted sideways. Your date. Yes, Flora, my date. The woman who arrives with me and leaves with me. Is that going to be a problem? 6 months. 6 months of being his secret, and suddenly he wanted her on his arm in front of Seoul's entire elite. Why? The question came out before she could stop it. A pause. Why not? Do-jin. It's just an event, Flora. Wear something beautiful. I'll send a car at 7. He hung up before she could ask any of the 1,000 questions spinning through her mind. Mina found her 10 minutes later, still staring at the invitation. That's the business.